Hello everybody and welcome to the Introduction to Perl. As with a human language, it's important to know the culture behind a computer language. To that end, I'll give you a little background on history and philosophy and talk about which paradigms that Perl supports. Okay, and that's what I just said. I'll just say it again. We talk about the history, talk about the philosophy, and then we'll get into the programming paradigms. Okay, here we go, history. This is Larry Wall. When you get to make a certain amount of money, you don't have to dress up. That's kind of cool. And he developed this back in 1987, and this was kind of a secondary career for him. Originally, he wanted to translate the Bible into the new African language, but couldn't travel to Africa. Now, I had African friend of mine tell me that, like the Philippines, every village in Africa had its own dialect. So if you wanted to translate the Bible into all African languages, you'll have job security, and you probably need a computer to help you with it. Well, anyway, he came back and then he started on with being a system administrator. And he originally called Perl, he called it Perl with an A, but then he found out that name was already taken. Now, the reference in his case is to Peril of the Pearl, which is in Matthew, starting at Matthew 13:45, it's the pearl of great price. So he dropped the A to make sure he didn't have a copyright violation. It was originally intended for text manipulation. He was a linguist, and that's where his background is, and that's part of the strength of Perl, is it's really good for manipulating strings. Okay, he used it for system administration, network programming, and a few other things. These are the things that are near and dear to my heart. Now, one thing, as a system admin and a network programmer, a lot of times when you write a program, it only needs to run one or two times correctly, and then you go on to another program. So you really don't have to refine it that much. And that's kind of reflects in the personality of Perl. Perl's been characterized as a Swiss Army chainsaw, and it's also been called messy. Larry calls it messy. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And I got some references on here where I got the stuff. You're welcome to look for further information. Okay, so getting into the philosophy of this, we talked about it's kind of messy and all that. Why is it so messy? Well, the Perl motto is there's more than one way to do it. And these are directly from Perl.org. This is the official word of it. Defining how many more is left is an exercise to the reader. Okay, yeah. To me, if I find one way to do something, I'm done. They have some Perl sites where they actually compare the different way that somebody beginning Perl would program it, an intermediate and an advanced person would program it. Okay. When we talk about the three principal virtues of a programmer, laziness, impatience, and hubris, see the Camel book for why. Okay, the Camel book is basically the how to program in Perl. It's got a big camel on the cover, and it's the same camel you see here in these seals. Let me go over here where you can see it. You can't see it because of my picture. And this camel's become the symbol of Perl. And laziness, impatience, hubris. I will tell you that programmers are lazy. We try to find the easiest way to do things. Impatience, we don't want to wait for a long time for information or for results. And hubris is we're always under some sort of a deadline. Okay, just some other interesting things. If you want to hear the man himself talk about his philosophy of Perl, let's see if this works. I'll pull this over. And this is what he says about Perl. He says it's Perl, the first postmodern computer language. And we go through this, then you realize this is a very deep philosophical thing for him. A little bit too deep for me, but if you're interested in that sort of thing, there you go. Now, like I said, there was a culture that's come up with Perl. And here's an example. There's actually Perl poetry. And it's thinking about it. The site, by the way, is called perlmonks.com. There it goes. And it has all sorts of things that are some really, really geeky humor about Perl. So this is a program that's been around a while. It's got its own philosophy. It's got its own culture that's kind of grown up around it. And I kind of characterize it as the hippie of the scripting languages, because like there's many places to do things. Wow, man, that's just whatever way you can find to do it. But don't try to hold it to a single way of doing things. Okay, paradigms. As you would surmise by saying there's many ways to do things, it actually supports about 3 different paradigms. Now, the procedural programming you should be familiar with from your procedural programming course, and some of you are making it through the object-oriented programming course. Some of you will be. Those are both what called imperative. An imperative is when you give it an order and it does it. Now, there is also a third paradigm called functional programming, where you basically declare what you want the answer to look like. And Perl can do that. One of the Lisp type languages, if you hear those, and Lisp stands for Lisp processing, are that type where you think of everything as a function that terms a value, and what happens is basically it doesn't have a lot of decision branches and all that. It's very deterministic, and that has its advantages and disadvantages, and you'll get to see that in a little bit when we talk about Racket. So that's the end of the introduction to Perl. Let's go out and bust some code.